about is an anime thing, so it's like an analyzation of like training arcs, I guess. So we'll see.
Every day, even if just a little bit, we have to improve. That is the quote hanging above my head while I make this video, though I don't even live like that, I just thought it sounded cool. Deliberate self-reflection and self-betterment are one of the few things we as humans have over animals. Of course, as most aspects of humanity tend to go, this has inevitably become reflected in the stories that we make and tell. To that end, one of the most engaging aspects of storytelling is watching a character who starts from nothing slowly develop into a protagonist who is mountains beyond where they started, whether that be based on maturity, power, or both. Thus, there is a massive responsibility on the author, not just to make this process engaging, but to also make it mean something. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, they do not. There are many different ways to achieve character progress, some of which we'll cover later on in this video. But before that, we need to talk about the most problematic form of training. Enter the brute force training approach, the easiest way to make your character develop without actually putting any actual thought into it. You've seen it before because it's everywhere. Let's say you have a protagonist who you need to be stronger. Why take them through difficult and complicated trials which make them analyze their own abilities, when instead, you could give them a couple of weights and have them do a non-distinct amount of push-ups, and suddenly, bam, just like that, the protagonist is as strong as the plot needs them to be. This is boring. You know this is boring, everyone knows this is boring. I don't get excited when I see a character doing push-ups or the same move over and over. I get excited when a character's growth is actually being thought through. So why do authors write like this? What can you do instead? And what are some terrible and standout examples of how you actually define your protagonist's progress? Well, in this video, that's what we're going to find out. So stick around, you might just learn something. The basic concept behind the brute force training approach is pretty simple. If you've ever been to the gym before or trained for a sport, you'll understand the concept. The more you do something, the better you get, whether that be lifting weights or running, or I don't know, the more of you subscribe, the bigger the subscriber count will grow, so do that please, subscribe. In the case of fictional power systems, it's typically something like use the same special attack enough and it'll get stronger, or fight enough opponents and you'll just become better at fighting. For a writer, this is a very convenient way of building up a character's progress without actually having to think of any particularly interesting ways to make them improve. You just rinse and repeat. Now, I'm not saying this form of progression is inherently wrong. In fact, almost every single shonen series incorporates it to some capacity. But just like any other trope, there are limits to how much you can actually pull it off before it begins to detract from your writing. And one of the most egregious case studies of this is found in none other than Dragon Ball, the series that arguably made this form of linear progression popular in the first place. Let's do an exercise. Let's take a fight from the tail end of the series and compare it to a fight from the near beginning. For the most part, the only notable difference you'll find is the current color of Goku's hair and his invisible power level. This is because progression in Dragon Ball follows the exact
Uh, Wait, let me see. You said yes. Yes. This is why animes like My Hero Academia is more fun to watch, because the limitations of a character shows more of what you can do with them in creative ways. I think a perfect example of this is like Lemillion from My Hero. At first, him facing through stuff seemed like a not that big of a flashy power, but the way he uses it makes it much more interesting, and how it's presented, especially how it works, how his quirk works to a degree where he can use it to his advantage against his opponents. Um, Given that he's a close combat fighter, so it makes sense why someone like him should have the power he has, because him as a close combat fighter has to be up and close, but he needs to know how to work around that without being hit himself or putting others in danger. I think the perfect example of that when he was fighting what do you call Overhaul, and that one dude who was trying to shoot Airy in the face or shoot her with the gun. he was able to kick him at the same time without hurting her, which was probably difficult on his behalf. There's a lot of I recommend starting with locations of Metal Gear V. I see.
Exact same cycle of train for a while, get beat up by the current antagonist, get stronger, then power up and win. Goku rarely has to contemplate ways of defeating his opponents. He simply has to train under tougher and tougher conditions, and eventually the problem will be solved. Even outside of just this basic cycle, the repetitiveness of improvement in Dragon Ball is literally baked into the power system itself. Zenkai boosts are massive bursts of power that Saiyans receive after recovering from near-fatal injuries. From a writing perspective, this completely trivializes a massive portion of combat, and is one of the laziest systems I've ever seen implemented into a power system. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, but Goku could literally keep throwing himself at a problem, change nothing about his strategy, and as long as he's able to recover, he will eventually become strong enough to beat them through just losing. And it's not like Goku never learns new techniques. Instant Transmission, Kaioken, Ultra Instinct, these are all non-linear ways in which Goku was able to progress in strength that massively changed how he fought his opponents. But moments like these are so rare that for the vast majority of the series, all you're left with is brute force problem solving. If Goku grew like that more often, learning new techniques or using pre-existing techniques in more strategic ways, the narrative behind his fights would be so much more interesting. But instead, 99% of the time, he simply gets to do the same thing over and over again until the problem is out of his way. So, how are you meant to progress your characters? Well, outside of the brute force approach, I believe there are two other, better ways to bolster a character's growth in a battle narrative, which both require the slightest bits of actual effort. Let's start with the evolutionary approach. The evolutionary approach to power progression is all about unlocking new abilities that naturally extend from a character's core skill set. Instead of relying on simple stat increases, this method treats a character's growth like a skill tree, branching outwards in response to new challenges, environments, and opponents. Each new ability isn't necessarily stronger, it's contextual, unlocked because the situation demanded it.
Yes, that's good. Because it puts a limitation, or at least put a cap on that power system. That's a good thing. Because once it gets to a point where there's no cap, it's almost pointless to get into it, because it's like you might get to a point where you're so strong that you don't know how to measure that, and then you end up being in the one punch man situation where I'm too strong to just fuck with you, so it's kind of boring. It's like God mode, eventual God mode. It's just like, eh.
The result is a character whose power set feels like a reflection of their journey, rather than a flat reward for going through a training arc. A perfect example of this is Isagi Yoichi from Blue Lock. At the start of the series, Isagi has two clear weapons, spatial awareness and his direct shot. But as the story goes on, Isagi is constantly thrown into situations where these base tools aren't enough. While there are points in the story where Isagi will get better through the brute force approach, like when he spams shots against the robot goalkeeper, this is never the focus. His rapid evolution is. When he notices his reliance on his right leg, he learns to shoot with his left, before evolving further to combine this with a feint, making—
She said, Christina says, it's why I like Sailor Moon, because her powers level up from the very first season all the way on to the eternal. Still love that series. That's more of a guilty pleasure, if anything, based on context what we're talking about.
The two-gun volley. When he realizes his spatial awareness isn't enough, he evolves it further into metavision, the ability to read the entire field using peripheral vision and mental processing, before further evolving it to predict the future of the field itself. These are not random power-ups, they're natural extensions of what he already had, grown out of necessity, shaped by experience, and rooted in his character. The best part of all of this is that Isagi doesn't abandon any of his old skills like some other series would do. He layers them. Every new evolution builds up on the last, and it's quite obvious to see why this is a far more interesting approach than just watching him learn to kick stronger or run faster. Then we have the tactical approach. The tactical approach to character progression doesn't involve unlocking new powers or transformations. Instead, its sole focus is on deepening the character's mastery of what they already have, refining their timing, improving their strategies, and discovering smarter, more inventive ways to apply their pre-existing abilities. While the evolutionary approach is about getting new tools, the tactical approach is about learning to use old tools better. One great example of this is that of Megumi Fushiguro from Jujutsu Kaisen. Megumi starts off the series admittedly a bit of a weakling. Nameless cursed spirits are giving him trouble, and you can generally tell that he isn't actually all that. His cursed energy output is mid-tier, and he's lacking in physical strength compared to characters like Yuji or Todo. However, where Megumi lacks in sheer brute strength, he more than makes up for in versatility. Megumi's ability works because it is inherently modular. The same ability can play offense, defense, or utility depending on Megumi's creativity, and we get to see him find some working strategies, then repeatedly apply and improve upon them in new situations. For example, Megumi learns how to deactivate his Shikigami right before his enemies as an effective version of a feint. He learns to use Max Elephant not just to hose down his enemies, but also to crush them. He learns to use his Toad's grappling abilities not just to ensnare people, but also to pull him out of danger. All of these strategies are like chest openings, and while Megumi's cursed energy output and such does presumably grow throughout the series, this is never the main focus for his improvement. His increasing ability to strategize is. Want another example? Well, there's Jolene Kujo, another character who grows not by refining their strength, but by refining their strategy. Stone Free is an incredibly simple ability on paper. The user can unravel their body into string and use this to fight at mid-range. But throughout Stone Ocean, Jolene manages to take this ability and massively increase its utility. Whether it be reforming herself with string to be bulletproof, using it to stitch up her own wounds, deploying a net to detect movement, or some even more insane stuff. Wow, Jolene's core ability never actually changes or evolves. All that does is her capability to use it. This form of progression is much more involved and thought through than just say letting her make longer and more durable string, which is what you'd end up.
It's a creativity field. The more creative you can get with, the more interesting the fights get, because the possibilities are endless from that point, depending on what the character can do. Now, not saying that it's endless in the sense that they can do anything. It's endless in the sense that it's contextual, like he said. It's based on the context of how the fight's gonna go that makes it interesting. Just like the idea between, this is why the fight between Gaara and Lee is such a memorable time, because they're two opposites of the same coin. One uses genjutsu and ninjutsu, one uses taijutsu. It's how they fight makes the difference. One's full of defense, the other one's pure offense. They're polar opposites to a degree, not only just in capabilities, but also in just ideology. In that sense, so like when you're watching it, it's like it's the hardworking taijutsu ninja against the gifted genius slash murderous intent individual who doesn't give a fuck. He has nothing but power in his hands. So that's where Gaara fucks up. Gaara fucks up because he believes that you gotta put in that work, bro. You gotta understand your characters. But that's good. Like you see, like you have to write fights like this. You have to stress test your character and how much it makes sense. You have to stress test them. If you don't stress test them and you just kind of just go with it because it sounds cool, you're gonna have a problem when you run something that is either the same, similar, or completely different of what this character is going to go up against. And you don't want to write yourself in a wall where you can't get out of it, where it's going to be a Deus Ex Machina situation, where because you have plot armor, therefore you won. Or you wrote the character or the antagonist is to be stupid to make a, like for instance, it's equivalent to like you write your character, it's like you write an antagonist who is very calm, cool, collected, and very vicious. and then you had your protagonist fight this same antagonist, and the antagonist has your protagonist at on the ropes, about to kill them or defeat them, whether it's a training arc or like a tournament arc, or a case may be. And instead of them doing what they're supposed to do based on how they are, for some odd reason, you wrote the character to have a monologue situation in which they never speak, to have a whole, like, they monologue some type of nonsense that has nothing to do with the fight, or if it does have to do with the fight, they talk too damn much. It gives the character, your character, enough time to pull a 180 on them so they can win the fight. So the only reason why your character won is because the current character just went stupid for literally for no reason. That's a Deus Ex Machina thing. That doesn't feel right. You know what I'm saying? It's the equivalent of watching like Thanos about to be taken out, and then all of a sudden Star-Lord just happens to do a monologuing. Like, bro, what is this? And then when you found out he killed Gamora, you have a meltdown to a point where he gets the glove and then takes out everybody. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? Like, that's why most people, being a Star-Lord fan at that time was probably the worst thing ever. It was almost like, it's like by association, it just pisses you off.
With if you went down the brute force approach, an improvement with very little substance. So, what's the point I'm trying to make here? Well, for starters, I am by no means saying that you shouldn't indulge in some linear progression in your writing every now and again. Most stories don't need their characters to unlock a new ability or a new way to use pre-existing abilities each fight, and to be honest, it can be just as satisfying to see them improve through sheer dedication and hard work as it can to see them improve through new strategies.
I think Oz is the perfect example of what happens when you, like, bro, buffed out. He buffed the fuck out. Short, but yet, like, it's that he's a short guy, but he makes it up for strength. He has hard strength, stamina, but he's not tall.
Abilities. But the problem begins when that's all you ever rely on. Characters should only be able to go so far through basic repetitive training. A good story will have a little bit of brute force, but lean much more heavily on the evolutionary and tactical approach. So add a little spice here and there.
Just fly
Let your
and
characters
walk
go through some self-reflection, and both your audience's interest.
I'm not gonna lie, even though he's short, Asta, for some weird reason, the way he looks makes me feel like he shouldn't move the way he does. It's like, does anyone feel that way? I hope I'm not the only one who thinks this. Maybe it's just me, but like, I like the way he looks, like how buffed out he looks, feels like he shouldn't move the way he does, as if he's not. Okay, I'm not crazy. I don't think I'm crazy on this. Like, it just feels weird. Like, he's so buffed out and wide, so the way he like does flips and stuff, and like he's a little bit, he's a lot more acrobatic than he should be. That's what I'm saying. It's weird.
And your story's narrative will massively benefit, because life is hardly ever a straight line. And as a storyteller,
yeah, like it looks really stiff. That's the weird part.
Okay, that's it from me. Got any favorite cases of character progression you'd love to talk about? Well, leave them in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed, remember to leave a like, a subscribe, and with that, I bid you adieu. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
So this was PintIsHere. I think I'm gonna put this one on the reaction channel. This particular segment. I don't think it was a bad view. I think it was a pretty good video. I think he made his case pretty clear. Here, why flawed abilities are more interesting. Ooh, we're gonna watch that next. Finally has Shonen finally has a ruthless protagonist. Okay, so we'll do the next one from Pit. I'll do 2 more videos of Pit, and then we'll see what we'll go from there. Isa just killed little manga purchase online. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one. If you guys like this, like and share, follow. If you guys like this, like, subscribe, share, follow, and comment, and all that great stuff. This will be on the reaction channel. Hopefully, if Pitt sees this, I hope he enjoys this reaction. I think he did a good job on this video. He made it pretty clear cut in what he was trying to, convey. I'm gonna go to one of his other videos. I like his videos.
Alright, let me ask you a quick question. At what point in a story are the protagonist's abilities at their most interesting. If you take a moment to really think about it, the vast majority of you will probably come to the same conclusion that it's at the tail end of the series. And
I'm probably familiar with some indie characters that might be up there. Like, I know Hollow Knight, and we already know Silksong from, we know Hornet from Silksong. But I probably know a few others. Probably Undertale's probably up there.
And I completely understand that viewpoint. By the end of the story, the protagonist has likely reached the pinnacle of their strength, perfecting every skill they've picked up since the beginning, and often unlocking some kind of god-tier endgame power that ends up defining their character in all future power scaling debates.
I only do anime-focused stuff. I'll do sometimes put stuff, reaction stuff here, but it has to be like art-related. I only put anime-related stuff onto that thing, so it could be like an analyzation like this, or a manga recommendation, or an anime recommendation type stuff. I try to keep it niche.
And for the most part, I completely agree with this perspective. There's definitely something satisfying about seeing a protagonist you've grown attached to fully master their abilities. But even so, I've always had a soft spot for a different period in their growth. Right around, say, the 30% mark of the story, when they've unlocked their long-term abilities, but they're still rough around the edges, unpolished, learning. Because to a large degree, I believe there is a kind of beauty in imperfect abilities. One that allows writers to create more engaging scenarios and battles than perfect abilities allow. So what is it that makes these flawed, incomplete powers so interesting? How do great writers portray the early stages of a character's growth in a way that's compelling? And what are some standout examples of this being done well? That's what we'll be exploring in today's video. So stick around, you might just learn something important. So why do I enjoy the protagonist's imperfect abilities more than their fully realized endgame version? Well, it all comes down to one thing: flaws. When designing an ability, there's a sort of trifecta of flaws that a writer should consider. Each element adds depth.
I'm pretty sure if I'm watching this, as we're watching this, I think he's going to use Hunter x Hunter as a perfect example of this, on how like Nen abilities work. He's not going to tell us how Nen abilities work, but I think he's going to use this as a form of example. Because you can't be the perfect Nen user without having some type of flaw one way or another. It's designed for you to have some form of flaw. You can't be perfect in all Nen abilities, or at least Nen attributes. You have to be strong in one place than others. Now, you can be well-rounded, but you can't be perfect. Metal Gear is like an anime, right? Kind of. No, yeah, Metal Gear. The Metal Gear series is pretty anime influence. If ultimately it's a video game first, but it's more anime than anything. It's not because it's just made from a Japanese person or like the Japanese, but it has that narrative, that type of bravado for it to be an anime in general. So I can see, like, if there was an anime for Metal Gear Solid, that could be, that's believable. If anything, most people refer to Metal Gear as anime anyway, given that its affiliations of being like on Nintendo with Smash Brothers, because majority of the characters there are pretty much anime influence or anime focused in general. So yeah, I wouldn't see that. I would see like Solid Snake being a anime compared to a Tom Clancy Splinter Cell. When you hear Tom Clancy Splinter Cell, you don't, or at least if you know what Splinter Cell is, you don't really think anime. You think like American patriotism, like something you've seen like in Sniper or something like that, or like Jack Reacher or some shit like that, or like a James Bond. And the artist does the concept is cool. Yeah, it's very. I think the artist who makes the art for Metal Gear is a anime artist overall. They paint the way they do.
And together, they shape how the ability interacts with the story. The first of these is the weakness, and is actually the least important of the three. Weaknesses are what counter the ability. It's useful to have a few in mind when crafting powers. Some writers go for hard counters, like an ability that becomes completely useless in the light, while others opt for a more indirect weakness, like situational disadvantages. But overall, this is the most superficial layer. The next trifecta is the limitations of the ability. These refer to the upper bounds of what the ability can actually achieve, the limits of its destructive power, the maximum output the user can reach.
I think this one's a nice one. Limitations, I think, is one of the best parts of power scaling or something like that. Because in my honest opinion, the easier I think because of limitations are nice because you can make a character seem really strong, but they can only go so far being strong. So like perfect example is like Midoriya versus like what's his name? Shoujo. What's his name? The one with the eye. He like Zuko. What's his name? Fuck. Oh my god, I forgot his name. Is it Shogo? Shogo. I feel I'm saying that wrong. Shoto. When he went against him, there's so much ice he can make, and also so much fire he can use. After a while, it will start eating at his body. Todoroki, there you go. With Todoroki. So like with Todoroki, he can use so much ice, but he can't unlimitedly keep making it without any form of consequence. He'll start getting some form of frostbite, or like if he uses too much fire, he'll start getting burnt himself after because his body gets he gets terrible, but after a while of too much use, he'll start getting burnt. Just like in Fire Force, like with Benny, for instance, Berimaru. Or any other of the characters, if you use too much fire for a too long period of time, it's like kind of like a muscle. You start getting scorched yourself. So that's a cool thing. You can't just have one character who's just overpowered using one power over and over and keep saying fireball constantly. Like it's boring, or it just gets it doesn't get interesting anymore. It's just like, oh, if that person's there, they're just gonna definitely win because they can just one shot you with that one move every time. You know what I'm saying? So it makes sense. Same thing with Fat Gum. When Fat Gum was fighting those two mafia dudes from who worked for what's his name? For Overhaul, his power works based on how much beatings he can take, and then whatever the beatings he takes, he loses weight. So he's incentivized to get fat, so he can build fat, and that fat gets absorbed by whatever hits he takes, and he can dish it right back out. But it's pretty much a one-time trick, because if he doesn't hit the target, he's back to like a normal like dude to a degree. I don't know what other powers he has other than that one punch type move, but it's a risky move. It's a risk reward type thing. So that's a limitation in itself.
Or the points where the character can't push it further. It defines the ceiling of their potential, at least for now. And then there's the drawback, which I believe is the most important and interesting piece of this trifecta. Drawbacks are consequences that directly punish the user for misusing or overusing their powers. Think of a character who burns themselves by pushing their fire abilities too far, or someone who suffers painful recoil from pushing their body beyond its limits. These drawbacks ground the power in risk and consequence, and that makes them fascinating. And therein lies the main issue with polished endgame abilities. Writers often completely erase this entire trifecta. As characters grow stronger, abilities tend to lose their limitations. What once had a strict boundary now feels limitless. Counters become irrelevant because the power is so versatile it can adapt to anything. And worst of all, the drawbacks, the essential elements of tension, are dropped altogether. And why is this a problem? Well, because you lose tension. You lose the sense of risk, of vulnerability, of creative problem solving. Flawed abilities act like puzzles. The protagonist has to think, adapt, and sometimes even suffer to make them work. That struggle adds a layer of complexity to the writing, and when it's gone, something vital is lost. And no part of storytelling makes this more obvious than with transformations. Only blah 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 percent, whatever. Okay, let's make a deal. If this number goes up to 4% by my next video, I will not make one of these subscriber breaks for the next 3. Okay? Deal. Back to the video. To be honest, I've never really loved transformations as abilities. Most of the time, instead of offering some unique new power or a creative twist, they usually serve as a glorified stat boost. The character moves faster, the character hits harder, the character tanks more damage, and that's it. Just look at Ichigo's perfected Hollow Mask as one example. It's just a flat boost to his physical abilities. Sure, his attacks are black now or whatever, whoa, cool, but there's nothing really interesting going on besides him being stronger. Now compare these so-called complete transformations to the ones displayed earlier on in the series, and it becomes clear how much more compelling these early transformations were. One aspect that makes these early transformations so much better is the introduction of the Berserk state, where the character can only tap into their power while enraged or under extreme stress, losing control of themselves while doing so. And I have to say, I absolutely love these. Just take a look at Naruto's version 2 cloak. He can only access this form when emotionally overwhelmed, but the power increase is insane. It's destructive, raw, and comes with serious consequences. Unlike the perfected chakra cloak, which has almost no drawbacks, version 2 carries a real sense of urgency. The red cloak is literally formed by his blood boiling, cutting down his lifespan and destroying his cells. So even though we know Naruto gains the power to turn the tide of battle, we're still stressed watching it, wondering how he'll manage the aftermath. Or take Ichigo's earlier version of the Hollow Mask. Zangetsu would only step in when Ichigo was desperate, and even then, there was a constant threat of his inner hollow taking control. Every single time Ichigo was forced to use this form, it represented a failure of his ideals, having to borrow strength from the more primal version of himself, introducing an internal and deeper power struggle. These forms are so great because they introduce a second layer of tension. It's no longer just about winning the fight, it's also about managing the transformation itself. The protagonist is walking a tightrope, balancing risk with power and control. The limitation is that they can only access the form under extreme stress, and the drawback is that when they do, no one around them, not even themselves, is truly safe. But if you want an example of an early series transformation without the inner struggle dynamic,
the Kaioken?
Look no further than Kaioken.
Yep, the Kaioken. That was probably one of the best worst transformations that was given to Goku ever. It was a glorified stat boost for a meantime, but it had its literal limitations and it had its drawbacks. The more you use it, the more strain it puts on the body. Now, we all know that he used Kaioken again in the more recent version of like Super, but it doesn't still have that same impact after the fact, like in the old versions of Dragon Ball. When he was injured, you know Goku was injured. Like, you know, he could not move. Bro cannot fight back. And that was one of the biggest drawbacks. It was one of the reasons why Vegeta was able to put a good one on him. Squeeze the shit out of him and then almost break his arm too.
If you were to
that iconic scream of him,
ask me what my favorite Dragon Ball transformation was, well, I'd have to go with the most iconic choice and say Super Saiyan. But don't get it twisted, Kaioken is right there behind it. Kaioken is a simple yet effective transformation that perfectly balances risk and reward, allowing the users to tap into increasingly higher multiplications of power at the cost of damaging their body. What I especially love about this transformation is how variable and dynamic it is. Goku can decide how far to push it moment to moment, sometimes dipping into higher multipliers extremely briefly to minimize damage, while generally maintaining a safer range. That element of choice and strategy is what makes it way more engaging than basic transformations that just hand out stat boosts with no real consequences. Now for the real reason I made this video. To rant about how One For All was more interesting in the first 2 seasons than in the entire rest of the show. I'm just kidding. Kind of. Super strength is one of the most overused powers in all of fiction. Superman, Spider-Man. At this point, literally every shonen power system has it bundled in like it's part of a starter kit. But the early version of One For All? That was one of the most unique takes on super strength I had ever seen, and that's all because of its ridiculous drawback. Hirokoshi nailed the raw impact of the ability by making it physically destructive not just to the environment, but to the user themselves. When Deku used One For All early on, his limbs literally shattered. And it's not just that. The wind howled and the air physically bent with every single punch. We as the audience didn't need to be told that One For All was strong. We could see it for ourselves. Remember when All Might literally changed the weather with a single punch? That's how you sell power. But what really sold One For All as special to me was the toll it took, the drawback. Seeing Deku burn through his own limbs like they're bullets in a chamber, shattering fingers, breaking arms, using already broken limbs to keep fighting, it's one of the sickest dynamics I've seen come out of a power system. Sure, he inevitably had to evolve.
I'm telling you, the only time I cringed hard when I saw him use his powers, and when I say cringe, I'm not talking about like meme cringe. I'm talking about like, oh, like that gotta hurt type cringe. Like, oh my god, you only see when someone got hit, and you're like, ooh. The only time I had that moment is when bro got punched in the finger by that dude who like reads minds or like takes over people's mind with a question. When bro punched bro's fingers, I thought that was unnecessary as fuck. It came up so fast, you don't really see it happen till it happens. Like, it just happens so damn fast. I'm like, bro, like, what the fuck? Like, I get it. Like, he's your opponent. Yo, bro, when I saw that, I had to look away for like a good minute. It bothered me so much. It felt such a, like something felt like such like a cheap shot. Like that felt like a cheap shot of a punch. I'm like, bro, no, that was painful as hell. It's hard to watch that scene every time for me.
Past this level of self-destruction. But for me, that broken version of One For All, the version that majorly cost him something, is more interesting than any of the 6
right?
quirks they later slapped onto him. And one of my favorite tropes to come out of this is when a character manages to use their abilities' drawbacks to their advantage. You don't get to see those kinds of scenarios with perfect abilities. Like with solo leveling, every single time an opponent tries to poison Jinwoo, nothing fucking happens because he's completely immune and his ability has no drawbacks nor limitations. I just roll my eyes because of how boring that is. Now compare that to Deku deliberately
Yep, you're not wrong. Who was it? Was it Nathaniel who said that earlier? I think it was Nathaniel who said that. Someone said that. Mine, bro, very boring.
Breaking his own fingers with One For All to break out of Shinso's brainwashing, and you can instantly tell which of these two scenarios is more interesting to me. But in my opinion, no one puts their flawed ability to the use better than Yuji Itadori. For most of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuji is technically powerless. Compared to other sorcerers, he doesn't have a flashy curse technique. What he does have is inhuman super strength and dysfunctional cursed energy control, which again sounds basic, but luckily, Gege knew how to take a flaw and turn it into a feature. Enter Divergent Fist. At first glance, it's not even a real technique. Rather, it's an unfortunate side effect of Yuji being unable to sync his cursed energy with his punches properly. But because of this flaw, Yuji's attacks gain a delayed second impact. It's much weaker than a perfectly timed curse-infused punch, but if used properly, it does manage to catch opponents off guard. And that trade-off is what makes it interesting. Yuji is forced to fight with this handicap, but he does manage to use it to his advantage. Again and again, Divergent Fist is capable of messing with opponents' timing and opening up opportunities. And even after Yuji learns how to properly infuse his strikes, he still falls back on it when the timing is right. Because even a flawed tool can be turned into a deadly weapon if used properly. So what is the point I'm trying to make? Well, it's simple. Flawed abilities are interesting because they force creativity. They demand a certain kind of growth, not just in raw power, but in how a character thinks. And that struggle, that tension, that give and take, that's where some of the most compelling storytelling happens. When abilities are too clean, too perfect, too convenient, they stop being tools for character development and just become bait for flashy animation sequences or Sakuga compilations. But when they're unpredictable, risky, or dangerous to the user, that's when characters rise above their limits, not just by overpowering the enemy, but also by outsmarting their own flaws. So yeah, no one is denying the fact that endgame power-ups are cool. Everyone loves seeing a protagonist at their peak, but I'll always have a soft spot for that messy middle stage, where the protagonist is still figuring it out, where every fight feels like a gamble, and when victory really and truly means something.
I don't mind when a protagonist is trying to figure out their powers. I find that interesting too, but I sometimes hate it when they take too damn long to do it. So what I'm talking about is this. I know this is not anime or considered as an anime at all, but I think shows like it's not My Hero, Danny Phantom and like Avatar: The Last Airbender, they take too fucking long to get to the point of like trying to understand their powers. They take like episodes over episodes, somewhere like a season and a half, just to get to the point of learning different like abilities. You know what I'm saying? Like if you watch Avatar season 1, he doesn't learn new abilities till he gets like to like late season 2. Like early season 2. Danny Phantom. It takes too damn long. I'm looking at the YouTube one. I don't know where the Twitch link is. You don't know where it is? It should be in the description. Right. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. But like there was a lot of episodes that was I don't think would change too much of the narrative of the story that made things longer than it should. If I'm remembering right. Um, but still, like same thing with Samurai Jack to a degree, but then again, it's not like Samurai Jack needed a power up per se. This one particular episode that kind of bugs me about Samurai Jack. Let me see. Let me see. Teacher, sorry. Oh, you got it? Okay, cool. Um, so like, okay, so like, I think there's one particular thing I hate most with Samurai Jack. It's one episode that really bugs me the most. Samurai Jack was always trained to fight already. The issue I have with Samurai Jack is the episode where he learns how to jump good. If you get what I'm saying, he knows how to jump really good by those that Tarzan looking dude and those monkeys. He never uses those abilities ever again. Like it's not technically a power up. It's more of a it's a it's a boost to his agileness. No jump good. There you go. No jump good. Like he doesn't like it doesn't really happen that much. Like it's never like brought up ever again for him to jump higher than he could. And it was kind of sad because like you kind of thought, oh, it's that type of show where he's gonna level up as he goes, or he's gonna learn different abilities from other like uh quirky characters to use against the fight of Aku. No, it just kind of gets nerfed and never sees again, or never gets mentioned ever again. So that was a disappointing thing. I remember.
It's those moments of hopeful desperation that
Hey,
make a
Venom.
story compelling in the first place. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know what your favorite flawed ability in fiction is in the comment section down below.
I really like videos like these because it keeps you thinking instead of just brainlessly watching something and just saying, "Oh, that was funny." I like stuff like this. It causes conversation and it brings more to the table of what could be mentioned and what's not. Yee. Yee. There's a delay? I'm sorry about that. Is there a delay? I may have to fix that later. Is there a delay? I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that, Ben. But yeah, so okay, so like so for those who are watching, I hope you guys enjoy this. Yeah, they're fun. Yeah. Yeah. I try to make it big enough where it doesn't take away from what I'm doing. I might change some things, but we'll see. So far, I think this is an easier way to understand what's happening. So one, you guys can see this the chat and stuff like. Oh, I just realized the chat was on top of the. Is the chat always on top of the thing? Oh no, that's not good. Hold on, let me remove it. I didn't know it was on top of it. Well, that's sad. That's gonna make the video hard to watch. Yeah, they're nice. They're very nice. It's easier to like, you know. Let me put it there. Maybe in that corner. That's better. All right. So yeah. So we're gonna go to the next one. So this was what's his name? Pitt. Yeah, I'll put that up in a second. But like we gotta get to we need another one. So like this is from Pitt is here. He has 31. Was it just changed? 31,000 subscribers. I hope you guys enjoy this. Like, share, follow, and comment. I'll see you guys next one. This will be on the reaction channel. Give them a follow. Ooh.